In a previous video, we talked about how all objects are passed into functions by reference, and we demonstrated what that means when you're passing in an immutable object. In this video, we're going to be passing lists and tuples into functions as arguments, and we'll examine what passing those by references mean and how the mutability properties of both of these types mean in this scenario. So let's look at this code here. We have a function called addExclaim, which basically will take a list or any iterable item for now, and we're going to be looping over the length of whatever this item list is. And for each one of those items, we're going to be adding an exclamation point at the end of it. Obviously, we can do it this way, or we could also use the augmented assignment like so. If I execute this cell and let's create another one for a variable, let's call it items, or let's call it words. Here I have wow, maybe such list. And now before I actually pass this into our function here, or before we pass it, let me actually go back to the function and let's print out the ID of this items. And we'll do it again after the for loop. So print ID of items. And over here, before we pass it into the function, we'll also print out whatever the ID of words. And here we can actually go ahead and call the function. So we'll do addExclaim and we'll pass in our words. And let's go ahead and see what happens here. But let me re-execute this function because we've made some changes to it. So let's run this again. Run this again. This is the ID for our words. Oh, actually need to make this words because that's a different variable probably from before. But let's go ahead and run this again. All right, so here's the ID for words. And if I call the addExclaim, we get that same ID, which basically means that the same identifier for what this memory place was, or whatever the address of this words list was in the memory, is the same that we passed into the function, and it was the same even after we've made some modifications to this list. Now if I go ahead and actually print out words, we should get all those words with the updated values, which basically are the ones with the exclamation point added at the end of it. If we try to do the same things with tuples, so if I have, here's my words tuple. All right, and if we print out whatever the identifier for our tuple here, and then we call the function addExclaim for the words tuple, and execute the function or execute the cell, we get this error that basically says this is a tuple. And as we know, tuples do not support item assignment. So whatever logic that we were trying to do over here, where we were looping over the items of the tuple and trying to update their values, is not supported or is not allowed because, as we know, tuples are immutable. All right, so now we can accept that this function would only work with lists. So let's copy it again. I'll bring it over here, and then let's talk some more about it. Now, not in all scenarios when I pass in a list into a function would I want this original function to be modified. What if I actually want to keep a copy of this original value so that even after I've made some modifications to it, I can always go back and see what the original value was. So for that, there are multiple ways we could go about this. One, let me actually go ahead and just run this one more time. And let's bring in our words list one more time, just to make sure that it still exists. All right, so obviously now if I call the function again by passing this words list, it will come back with 2 exclamation points. But as I mentioned, we would like to be able to use the function without modifying the original array. So assuming that this now is our original array, let's see what we would need to do. So if I call addExclaim, I can pass in this words list, but instead of passing it as is by reference, we could use the slicing functionality to basically create a copy of this value. So what I'm doing here is that I am creating a copy of this list, passing it into the function. And so if I execute that and try to print out our words, we see that they were not modified, but also we see that nothing came back because we did not have a return function or that would return whatever the result is out of this function here. So let's go ahead and remove all those prints. And after we've looped over the list of items, we can return whatever the new value of items are. So now if I run this, print words, this is the original. If I now call it with the copy, let's make sure that we capture the result into some variable. That way we can come back here and print it. But also for the demonstration purposes, let's print out what words are at this step here. We can go ahead and delete the cell. We're not going to need it for now. Now, if I execute the cell one more time, and let's actually make sure that we've ran them all in order. So here's the one with the redefinition of the function. Here's what the words are right now. And now here is the list after the modification and the before the modification. So this is how you're able to pass in your list to a function without modifying the original. Another way we could go about this is by recreating another variable here. So here I can create another variable and let's call it the copied items. And that's where we would either unpack this list of items like that, or we could also do it, just copy this out, or we could do it the same way. We would go with items and use the slicing. We could also use another function that we would import from a library called copy. This function is also called copy, so I actually could do from copy import copy. And here, when I've called the function like this here, instead of passing the list of words, I could also do copy this, and this would essentially just create a copy of this before it passes it over into our function. So now if I do print the result and run it, we get it with 2. Why? Because I started with the original that only had 1, and then we added the second exclamation point. So as a summary, you just need to remember that as you pass lists and tuples into a function, the function is always going to be trying to mutate it if that's what you've instructed the function to do. So you just always need to remember the mutability properties of the items or the objects that you're passing into your function, just so you are not running into unexpected behaviors of your code.